The conference room at Henderson and Walsh Law Offices smelled like expensive leather and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Austin, the Texas Capitol building visible in the distance. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks after Grandpa Thompson's funeral, and the family had gathered for what my brother called the property settlement meeting. I'd driven in from my apartment in Houston that morning, arriving exactly on time. Mom and Dad sat on one side of the mahogany table. My brother Ethan, 35, sat beside them with his wife Jennifer, both dressed like they were closing a corporate merger. Ethan's attorney, some guy named Brad in a too-tight suit, had a stack of folders in front of him. Then there was me. Riley Thompson, 32, sitting alone on the opposite side wearing jeans and a blazer, my leather messenger bag on the floor beside me. The family attorney, Mr. Henderson, looked uncomfortable as he shuffled papers. Before we begin, I want to clarify, this isn't technically a will reading. Mr. Thompson's will was straightforward. The question today is about the 8 rental properties in Austin and how they should be. There's no question, Ethan interrupted, leaning forward. I managed those properties for 7 years. Grandpa trusted me with them. I handled every tenant issue, every repair, every tax filing. For 7 years, Riley. While you were off doing whatever you do in Houston. Data analytics, I said quietly. Right. Data analytics. Ethan's tone made it sound like I'd said, unemployed. Meanwhile, I've been building real value. I turned those properties from neglected rentals into premium income generators. Monthly revenue increased 34% under my management. Jennifer nodded supportively. Ethan's been working so hard on those properties. Nights, weekends. I know, Mom said, reaching over to squeeze Ethan's hand. We've seen how dedicated you've been, sweetheart. Dad cleared his throat. Riley, you have to understand. Ethan's put in the work. He's earned these properties. Mr. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Thompson, legally speaking, the properties are part of the estate and I have a proposal, Ethan said, sliding a folder across the table toward Henderson. I've consulted with my attorney. Since I've been managing the properties for 7 years, established property management precedent and sweat equity, I have a legal claim to ownership. Adverse possession doesn't apply since Grandpa owned them, but the principle stands. I've been the de facto owner. Brad, the tight-suit attorney, jumped in. Texas law recognizes sweat equity in property disputes. My client has invested approximately 3,600 hours managing these properties over 7 years. At a reasonable rate of $75 per hour, that's $270,000 in labor, not counting the 34% value increase he generated. I listened silently, watching Ethan's performance. He'd always been good at this, making his work sound more impressive than it was, claiming credit for outcomes that would have happened anyway in Austin's booming real estate market. The 8 properties are currently valued at $3.8 million, Ethan continued. I'm proposing the estate transfer them to me in recognition of my management contribution. Riley gets other estate assets, Grandpa's savings, the stock portfolio, whatever. But the properties should be mine. That seems fair, Mom said immediately. Dad nodded. Riley, you haven't been involved with the properties at all. You don't even live in Austin anymore. I manage Grandpa's 8 Texas rentals for 7 years, Ethan said, his voice rising slightly. Legally they're mine. That's just basic fairness. I looked at my brother across the table. He was so confident, so certain. He'd spent 7 years collecting rent, claiming credit, building his story as the devoted grandson who earned his inheritance through hard work. He had no idea what was actually in Grandpa's files. The real books. The ones I'd been quietly reviewing for the past 18 months. Understood, I said calmly. Ethan blinked, surprised by my easy agreement. So you're okay with this? I didn't say that. I said I understood your position. Mr. Henderson looked relieved. Good. Then perhaps we can discuss a distribution that. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, ignoring Henderson's disapproving look about phones during meetings. I opened my encrypted wealth management app and typed a message to my advisor, Marcus Chin at Chin Private Wealth Management. Withdraw all capital from Thompson Tech Ventures effective immediately. Execute within 2 hours. No grace period. Marcus's response came in 20 seconds. Confirmed. $6.2 million withdrawal processing. Ethan Thompson will receive termination notice by 12:15 p.m. This will likely collapse their Series C round. Proceed. Proceed. I set my phone face down on the table. 30 seconds later, Ethan's phone started vibrating. Then buzzing. Then ringing. He glanced at it, frowned, and declined the call. Sorry, where were we? You were explaining why you deserve Grandpa's properties, I said evenly. Right. So as I was saying, his phone buzzed again. And again. He looked at the screen, his frown deepening. I need to take this. It's my business partner. 1 second. He stepped out of the conference room. Through the glass wall, I could see him pacing, his free hand gesturing wildly, his face going from confused to pale to red. Jennifer looked worried. What's going on? No idea, I said, my voice neutral. Ethan burst back into the room, his face flushed. We need to pause this meeting. There's an emergency with my company. What kind of emergency? Dad asked. Our primary investor just pulled out. $6.2 million just gone. No explanation, no warning, just a termination notice. He looked at his attorney. Brad, can they even do that? Brad flipped through papers. Depends on the investment structure. If it was a revocable commitment or if they had an exit clause. This will kill our Series C, Ethan said, his voice rising. We had commitments contingent on that capital. Without it, everything falls apart. Mom looked stricken. Sweetheart, what does this mean? It means Thompson Tech Ventures might not survive the quarter. Ethan's hands were shaking. 5 years of work, gone because some anonymous investor decided to pull out with zero notice. I picked up my phone and made a show of checking something. That's unfortunate timing. Ethan's eyes snapped to me. You seem very calm about this. Should I be upset? It's your company. Right. My company. He stared at me for a long moment. The investor was anonymous. Came through some blind trust structure. We never knew who they were. Sounds like poor due diligence on your part. His jaw clenched. What did you just say? Building a company on anonymous capital seems risky. If you don't know your investors, you can't predict their behavior. That's basic business strategy. I don't need a lecture from someone who pushes spreadsheets around in Houston. Data analytics, I corrected. But you're right, I just push spreadsheets around. I wouldn't know anything about investment strategy or capital allocation or managing risk. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting given the circumstances. No, Ethan said sharply. No, we're finishing this today. I've worked too hard on those properties to let some business crisis derail this. He sat down, trying to compose himself. Where were we? You were explaining why Grandpa's properties should be yours, I said. Right. 7 years of management. Sweat equity. Value creation. It's straightforward. I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out a folder. Can I ask you some questions about that management? Ethan's eyes narrowed. What kind of questions? Property-specific questions. Since you managed everything so carefully. I opened the folder. Let's start with 2847 Riverside Drive. The duplex. You claimed you handled a major roof repair in 2019. Cost $18,000 according to the expense report you filed with Grandpa. Yeah, the roof was shot. Had to replace the whole thing. Interesting. Because I have the actual contractor invoice here. The roof repair cost $7,200. You billed Grandpa $18,000. Where'd the other $10,800 go? The room went silent. Ethan's face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. The roof cost $18,000. No, Ethan. It didn't. I slid the invoice across the table. This is from Apex Roofing, dated March 2019. Total cost including tax, $7,200. But you told Grandpa it was $18,000 and he reimbursed you from the property account. Brad leaned over to look at the invoice. His expression changed. Let's try another one, I continued. The property at 4521 Manor Road. You said the AC system needed replacing in 2020. You billed $12,000. The actual invoice from Cool Breeze HVAC was $5,800. That's another $6,200 you pocketed. This is ridiculous, Ethan said, but his voice was shaking. There were other costs, permits, labor. The invoices include all costs, permits, and labor. They're comprehensive. Want me to keep going? Mom looked horrified. Riley, what are you saying? I'm saying Ethan has been inflating repair costs and stealing the difference for 7 years. Grandpa paid him for maintenance. Ethan hired contractors for less than he claimed, and pocketed the gap. That's slander, Brad said quickly. Without proof of intent. I pulled out another document. Here's an email from Ethan to Grandpa, dated June 2019. The foundation work at the Lamar property will cost $22,000. Please transfer funds to the property account. The actual foundation company charged $9,400. Ethan kept $12,600. Dad had gone very pale. Ethan. This is taken out of context, Ethan said desperately. There were additional costs, unexpected issues. I have 47 invoices, I said calmly. All showing the same pattern. Inflated estimates, actual costs much lower, Ethan keeping the difference. Over 7 years, you stole approximately $340,000 from Grandpa. The room exploded. Mom started crying. Dad demanded to see the documents. Jennifer looked like she might faint. Brad was frantically typing on his laptop. Mr. Henderson had his head in his hands. Ethan stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You have no right. This is a family matter. You can't just. Sit down, Ethan, I said quietly. The tone in my voice stopped him. We're not done. He sat slowly, his face white. I pulled out another folder. While we're discussing property management, let's talk about rent collection. You've been collecting rent from all 8 properties for 7 years, right? You know I have. Monthly rent across all properties averages about $19,000. That's $228,000 per year, $1.596 million over 7 years. So where did it all go? I slid a bank statement across the table. This is the property management account Grandpa set up. The one where rent is supposed to be deposited. It should have $1.596 million in it over 7 years, minus operating expenses. Ethan reached for the statement, but I pulled it back. Don't bother. I'll tell you what it shows. The account has $340,000 in it total over 7 years. That's 21% of what should be there. The rest, $1.256 million, never made it to the account. Operating expenses, Ethan said weakly. Maintenance, repairs, property tax. Property tax is paid directly from Grandpa's estate account. I have those records too. And we already covered your fake repair costs. So where's the other $1 million, Ethan? He said nothing. I'll tell you where it is. You've been depositing rent into your personal accounts. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here and there. Then bigger chunks. By 2022, you were keeping 60% of all rental income. You told Grandpa occupancy was down, that tenants were struggling, that the market was soft. But I called every single tenant. They all paid on time. They all paid directly to you. And you kept their money. Jennifer stood up abruptly. I need to leave. Sit down, Ethan snapped at her. No. She grabbed her purse. I didn't know about any of this. I swear. I didn't know. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I didn't know. She walked out. Dad was staring at Ethan like he'd never seen him before. You stole from your grandfather? It wasn't stealing, Ethan said, but there was no conviction in his voice. I was managing the properties. I deserved compensation. You were already getting compensated. Dad's voice cracked. Dad paid you a management fee of $2,000 a month. Plus he covered all your expenses. You were making $24,000 a year plus benefits and you still stole. The properties were valuable because of me, Ethan said desperately. I increased their value. No, you didn't. I pulled out a market analysis report. Austin real estate appreciated an average of 8.7% annually during your management period. Grandpa's properties appreciated 8.4%. You underperformed the market while stealing from him. Mr. Henderson finally spoke, his voice heavy. Ethan, I need to advise you to retain criminal counsel immediately. This is felony theft. Grand larceny. If Riley files charges. I'm not filing charges, I said. Everyone stared at me. You're not. Mom whispered. Not if Ethan returns every dollar he stole within 90 days. All $1.596 million. If he does, we end this quietly. If he doesn't, I go to the Travis County DA with this entire file. Ethan's laugh was bitter. I don't have $1.6 million. Then figure it out. Sell your house. Liquidate your retirement accounts. Get a loan. I don't care. But you have 90 days. This is insane, Ethan said. You're destroying me over this? No, Ethan. You destroyed yourself. I'm just declining to cover it up. Brad was packing his briefcase. I need to withdraw from representation. This is well beyond property dispute. Dad looked at me with something like fear. Riley, where did you get all this information? Grandpa asked me to audit the properties 18 months ago. He was suspicious about the numbers. Rent seemed low. Expenses seemed high. He asked me to look into it quietly. You've known for 18 months? Mom asked. Yes. Why didn't you say anything? Grandpa asked me not to. He wanted to see how far Ethan would go. He wanted Ethan to show his true character. I looked at my brother. At the funeral, I thought maybe you'd confess. Maybe you'd admit what you'd done and try to make it right. Instead, you claimed you deserved the properties because you managed them. You're a vindictive. Careful, I said quietly. I'm vindictive? I'm not the one who stole from his dying grandfather. Ethan slumped in his chair. There's one more thing, I said. The properties you've been managing and stealing from? You don't get them. Obviously. Then who does? Dad asked. I pulled out a final document. Grandpa transferred them all to me 19 months ago. Quit-claim deeds recorded with Travis County. I've owned all 8 properties since March of last year. The silence was absolute. That means, I continued calmly, that Ethan has been stealing from me for the past 19 months. Not just from Grandpa, from me directly. That's an additional $361,000 in stolen rent and fake expenses since the transfer. Ethan looked like he might throw up. So here's the deal, I said. You have 90 days to return $1.956 million. Every dollar you stole from Grandpa before the transfer and from me after. If you do, we're done. No criminal charges, no civil suit, no public scandal. If you don't, I destroy you legally, financially, and professionally. Those are your options. I don't have $2 million, Ethan whispered. Then I suggest you start figuring out how to get it. Sell everything you own. Your house, your cars, your company. Oh wait, that's imploding today, isn't it? Tough timing. His eyes went wide. The investor. The $6.2 million. That was you. I didn't answer. You've been funding my company? For how long? 18 months. Since right after I started auditing the properties. Why? Because Grandpa wanted to see what you'd do. Would you use the capital to build something legitimate? Or would you keep stealing while claiming to be a successful entrepreneur? I leaned forward. You kept stealing, Ethan. Even with millions in funding, you couldn't stop taking money that wasn't yours. You set me up. No. I gave you opportunity and capital. You chose to squander it while committing fraud. That was your choice. Dad's voice was hollow. Riley, what about your startup? All those employees. They'll be fine. The company has runway for 90 days. If Ethan repays what he stole, I might consider reinvesting under new management. If he doesn't, the company closes and I write off the loss. Mom was crying. How did this family fall apart? It didn't fall apart, Mom. It's always been this way. Ethan has always been a thief. He just got better at hiding it. And you all enabled him because he performed success well. Fancy office, startup talk, property management claims. Nobody bothered to verify any of it. The meeting ended shortly after. Ethan left without another word. Brad scurried out behind him. Mom and Dad sat in stunned silence until Mr. Henderson gently suggested they go home and process everything. I stayed behind with Henderson to review the property transfer documents and discuss the criminal complaint I'd prepared but wouldn't file unless Ethan failed to repay. Ms. Thompson, Henderson said quietly, that was the most devastating family meeting I've witnessed in 30 years of practice. He stole $2 million from his grandfather and me. I'm just holding him accountable. The investor withdrawal, that was remarkably well timed. My grandfather taught me that timing is everything in both real estate and consequences. Henderson almost smiled. Your grandfather was a smart man. He knew exactly who to trust with his properties. I gathered my documents and headed back to Houston. The drive gave me time to think about what Grandpa Thompson had actually taught me in the 2 years before he died. The backstory was longer than today's meeting revealed. I'd left Austin for Rice University at 18, majoring in data science and economics. While Ethan stayed local, getting his business degree from UT Austin and immediately starting to help Grandpa with the rental properties, I'd been building a different kind of foundation. At Rice, I discovered I had an unusual gift for pattern recognition in complex datasets. I could see anomalies that others missed. I could track money flows through intricate systems. I could identify fraud before it became obvious. I'd graduated at 21 and been recruited by a hedge fund in Houston. Started as a data analyst, found $12 million in hidden losses within my first 6 months. Got promoted to forensic analysis team. By 25, I was leading investigations into corporate fraud for high-net-worth clients. By 30, I'd started my own consulting firm, Thompson Data Analytics, though I kept it deliberately low profile. My clients were family offices, private equity firms, and attorneys who needed someone to find money that people were trying to hide. I was very good at finding hidden money. Current annual revenue, $2.8 million. Personal net worth, approximately $14 million in liquid assets, another $23 million in investments and real estate. I lived quietly in a townhouse in Houston's Museum District. I drove a 6-year-old Honda. I wore jeans and blazers. I looked like a struggling data analyst, which was exactly what I wanted my family to think. Because 18 months ago, Grandpa had called me from his hospital room during cancer treatment. "Riley, something's wrong with the rental numbers." "What kind of wrong?" "The kind where money goes in but doesn't come out where it should. Can you look into it?" Quietly. I'd spent 3 weeks building a complete forensic analysis of 7 years of property management records. Every invoice, every rent payment, every expense claim, every bank transfer. I'd created a database tracking every dollar that should have flowed through the system and where it actually went. The pattern was unmistakable. Ethan had been systematically stealing from Grandpa since day one of his property management role. When I showed Grandpa the report, he'd cried. Not from surprise, he'd suspected, but from the confirmation that his golden child grandson was a thief. "What do you want to do, Grandpa?" "I want to see how far he'll go. I want to know if he'll ever stop on his own, or if he'll just keep taking until there's nothing left." So we'd made a plan. Grandpa would transfer the properties to me immediately before his condition worsened. The transfers would be legal and binding, but we wouldn't tell anyone. Ethan would continue managing properties he no longer owned, continuing to steal, not knowing he was now stealing from me instead of Grandpa. And I would document everything. At the same time, I'd create an anonymous investment vehicle, a blind trust that would funnel $6.2 million into Ethan's startup over 18 months. The capital would be structured with a zero-notice withdrawal clause. At any time, for any reason, I could pull all the money immediately. "Why fund his company if he's stealing from you?" Grandpa had asked. "Because I want to see if access to legitimate capital changes his behavior. If he has millions in startup funding, will he stop stealing from the properties? Or is theft just who he is?" Grandpa had smiled despite his pain. "You're testing him." "I'm documenting his character. If he stops stealing when he has other resources, maybe there's something redeemable there. If he keeps stealing even with millions in the bank, then we know exactly who he is." Ethan had kept stealing. Every month without fail. Even as his startup raised capital, even as he bragged about his business acumen, even as he positioned himself as the successful entrepreneur, he continued taking money from properties that no longer belonged to him. That told me everything I needed to know. Grandpa passed away 6 weeks ago. His will was straightforward. Everything split between Ethan and me equally except the properties, which weren't mentioned because they were already mine. I'd waited to see what Ethan would do. Would he confess? Would he try to make things right? Instead, he'd called a meeting to claim the properties as his own based on sweat equity and management contribution. That was when I'd decided it was time. 3 days after the meeting, Ethan called me. "Riley." His voice was flat, defeated. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "Thompson Tech Ventures is done. Without that capital, we couldn't close Series C. Our other investors pulled out. We're shutting down by end of month. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? You destroyed my company. No, Ethan. You built a company on capital you didn't deserve because you'd proven yourself untrustworthy. When that capital was withdrawn, the company couldn't survive. That's not my fault, that's yours. He was quiet for a long moment. The money you want. The $2 million. I don't have it. Then get it. Riley, I can't. My house has a $700,000 mortgage. My retirement accounts have $280,000. My company is worthless now. Even liquidating everything, I'm maybe at $400,000. Sounds like you should have thought about that before you stole from your dying grandfather. Please. His voice cracked. I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve mercy. But I'm begging you, don't destroy my entire life over this. Over this? Then you stole $2 million. You claimed properties that were mine. You've been lying to everyone for 7 years. This isn't a small mistake. This is systemic fraud. I'll pay back what I can. Every dollar I can get. Just don't file charges. I thought about Grandpa dying in that hospital room, hurt not by the cancer but by the betrayal of someone he loved. Here's my final offer, I said. You liquidate everything. House, cars, retirement accounts. You get a job and start paying me $5,000 a month until the debt is cleared. That's 20 years of payments. If you miss 3 payments in a row, I file criminal charges. Deal. 20 years. Would you prefer prison? Because those are your options. Silence. Deal, he whispered. Ethan, one more thing. You tell Mom and Dad the truth. All of it. No excuses, no justifications. You tell them you stole from Grandpa and me, that you lied for years, that you're a thief. If you try to spin this or make excuses, the deal is off. They'll hate me. They should. You're a thief. But at least you'll be an honest thief for once in your life. He hung up. 2 weeks later, I received the first wire transfer. $387,000. Ethan had sold everything. A month later, the first $5,000 payment arrived. Mom called me once, her voice small. Riley, Ethan told us everything. About the stealing, the lies, all of it. Good. Your father and I, we don't know what to say. We enabled him. We believed him over you when we should have asked questions. Yes, you did. Can you forgive us? Maybe. Someday. But not today. What about Ethan? Will you ever? No, Mom. Ethan showed me exactly who he is. People don't change that fundamentally. He'll make his payments because he's scared of prison, not because he's sorry. That's not redemption. That's just consequence. She cried. I let her. After we hung up, I looked out at the Houston skyline from my office. The 8 properties in Austin were now worth $4.6 million. The rental income, properly managed by a professional firm, generated $292,000 annually. That money funded a scholarship program I'd created, the Thompson Family Educational Trust. It provided full rides to first-generation college students from Austin who wanted to study data science, finance, or forensic accounting. Students who understood that truth is found in the numbers. That patterns reveal character. That sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who sees everything. Grandpa would have liked that. His properties weren't just buildings anymore. They were a legacy of integrity, funding students who valued truth over appearance, data over charisma, substance over performance. Ethan had managed the properties for 7 years and created nothing but theft and lies. I'd owned them for 19 months and turned them into something that actually mattered. That was the difference between us. And that difference was worth every uncomfortable family meeting, every difficult conversation, every burned bridge. Some people build. Some people steal. Grandpa had known the difference. He'd spent his last 2 years making sure the builder inherited his legacy, not the thief. I opened my laptop and reviewed applications for the Thompson Family Educational Trust. 23 students this year. All brilliant. All hungry. All from families who didn't see their potential. I approved all 23. That was what Grandpa's properties were really worth. Not the money. The opportunity to see and support people everyone else overlooked. People like I'd been. The invoice from Ethan came on the first of every month. $5,000. It would come for the next 19 years. I didn't need the money. But he needed to pay it. He needed to spend 19 years understanding what $2 million of theft actually cost. Not just in money. In trust. In family. In the life he could have built if he'd chosen integrity over theft. That was the real price. And he'd pay it 1 month at a time for the next 2 decades.